I'm Mike Farrington. Welcome back to my shop, aka the boardroom. In this video, I'm going to build a new router table. And this is just one in a series of shop projects that I have been working on lately. And for a small cabinet project like this one, I don't think there is anything better than the mighty biscuit joiner. So after breaking down a sheet of 1-inch thick MDF, I started on layout and joinery. And I always start the first cut 1 5/8 in from the edge. And I decided to go with 1-inch thick MDF because my local supplier carries it. It's pretty cheap and it is quite a bit heavier than 3/4 inch MDF. And for something like a router table, weight really helps. And you may be asking yourself why I decided to go with a biscuit joiner versus another tool like the Festool Domino. And there are a couple of reasons. The first being biscuits are significantly cheaper than the Festool Dominoes. And second, at least for me, using the biscuit joiner is much faster. I can typically cut about 3 biscuit joints to 1 Festool Domino mortise. And finally, in this application, biscuits are plenty strong. This is going to create a very rigid cabinet that's going to last for many years. And I've built plenty of cabinets using this exact method, and I have yet to have one fail. And I would just like to add that over the years of using this exact model of biscuit joiner, I've just kind of grown to love it. In fact, I worked in a shop for a while that had 4 of these going on any given day. And after years of use, this biscuit joiner has just kind of grown into the flow that I have when I'm working in the shop. And after the joinery was cut, it was time to clamp it up. And it was a really hot day when I was clamping this together, like probably 95 degrees. So I ended up stopping halfway through the glue up because things were just setting up too fast. So after letting that first clamp up sit for like an hour, I pulled the clamps off and then I put that center shelf in as well as the right side. Clamped everything together and it turned out just fine. Look over on the left side of the screen, you'll see my biscuit container rolling around. I knocked it off the workbench and simultaneously kicked it, so I had biscuits scattered everywhere. I like to call that a cluster fornication. Apparently I forgot one. If you look closely at this glue up, you'll see squeeze out everywhere. In reality, it's just a shop fixture, and I just didn't feel like taking the time to avoid squeeze out or clean it up. And you know what? It's still going to function the same. Here's one of my favorite tricks. If you turn a biscuit joint into a slot, you can slide 2 parts together. At this point, you can see the cabinet come together and what the basic form is going to look like. My original intention was to put drawers on the left and right sides of the upper section because I wanted my router table to be kind of like Norm's. And I decided against that because I looked at my router bit collection and I realized I do not need that much storage. So putting doors on would be easier, and I decided to go that direction. After seeing how sloppy my glue up was, I decided I should sand the outside just to at least knock down some of that squeeze out and make it look presentable. Now here's one area where I really did take my time. This is very much where the rubber meets the road. This surface is going to be the reference surface for the top, so I wanted this to be dead flat. So I used a precision straight edge and my number 7, and I got it as flat as is humanly possible. I made some clamping calls earlier for the glue up, and here's what I decided to do with those. Cut them a little shorter, and I'm using them here as just some backing material for the casters that I'm going to install. I'm using the Bloom Universal Drilling Template to install a 16-inch drawer slide. And if you're interested in more information about this jig and how I use it to install drawer slides as well as door hinges, please check out my video Tool Tantsu, and I go into a little bit more detail about it. I'm totally shifting gears here, but I needed to do this to get this piece drying. What I'm doing is gluing 3 pieces of 4/4 poplar together. This is going to become the mount for the power feeder that I'm going to add later. And also I use this exact same process except with 4 layers of MDF to create the base for the fence. And I'm using a West Systems notched glue spreader to help evenly spread the glue. Works pretty good and it costs about $1. So this little guy has been in my shop relentlessly. I've literally picked this praying mantis up and set it down gently outside 2 or 3 times. Every morning I come back in the shop. Here's a quick shot of the casters I like to use. I pick them up at my local Home Depot. And what's cool about them is it locks the wheel and it locks the rotation. These happen to be the 4-inch size, and if you look around my shop, you'll see these on almost everything that I've built. For the most part, I've always had very small shops up until this one, and I just kind of got used to putting everything on wheels and push it up against the wall when you don't need it, and when you do need it, pull it over by the workbench and get to work. And I still kind of follow that philosophy today, even though I probably don't need to, but, old habits die hard. So I know there are a million ways to build a drawer box. Here is another way, and that is to put them together with what's called trim head screws. And I absolutely love these screws. I stock them in a bunch of different sizes. And that's actually a number 1 square drive. And they leave a tiny little hole, and they have a bunch of holding power. And as far as using them in drawer box construction, it's pretty fast. Just drill a pilot hole and screw it together, and you're all done. I found myself bouncing all over the place during this build. Here's my old router table, and I'm pulling some hardware off of it that I'm going to reuse on the new one. You totally thought I was going to drill my leg right there, right? Well, I know I look dumb, but do I really look that dumb? So I made some doors and a drawer front, and I needed some finger pulls, so I decided just to drill a 1-inch diameter hole. I really like the look that the hole creates. I think it's an interesting design element, and I hope to use it on an actual piece of furniture at some point in the future. I wanted this router table to have better dust collection than my last router table, so I routed a 1/4 inch wide channel at the bottom edge of the center door, and I'm hoping that this creates a draft and prevents chips from settling in the bottom of the center section. Alright, moving on to the top. This top is a leftover piece of 1 1/4 inch thick MDF that I had from a project that I did almost a year ago now. And if you'd like to see that project, I have a video on my channel, and it's titled Built-in Bookcase Custom Cabinetry. So I needed to make a template so that I could cut the opening for my router lift, and I did that with a Forstner bit with the proper radius, and then I connected the 4 holes that I drilled with a track saw. I held the template in place with some double-sided tape, and then I used a pattern bit to follow the template. And here's a quick pro tip. If you need MDF to be a little stronger, pour some thin super glue over it, spread it around, and it kind of impregnates the MDF fibers and makes it much stronger. And in this case, I'm doing it so that my router lift leveling screws have a firm surface to rest on. Alright, at this point the power feed mount is dry, so I square it up and I mount the base of the power feed to it with 1/4 inch lag bolts. Alright, now it's time to work on the fence, and I want this fence to be even more robust than my morning cup of coffee. And as carefully as possible, I make sure that the face is square to the bottom. So here's what I came up with for a clamping mechanism. I drilled a hole and then made 2 cuts with a bandsaw to create this channel that the clamps will fit into. And I think using these clamps will work out better in the end than, say, 1/4-inch star knobs. Because of the force that the power feeder can exert on the fence, I wanted a really secure clamping mechanism. And as we all know, F-style clamps can really put a lot of clamping pressure down. This channel will be both for dust collection and bit clearance. Alright, next I attached a face to the fence, and I kind of consider this part sacrificial, so it's just screwed in place, and if it gets scratched or marred in the future, I'll just unscrew it and put a new one on. And I felt like my guns needed some sculpting because Miss Corningstone was going to pay me a visit. And I don't know if you heard or not, but I did over 1,000. If you get it, you get it. Here's how I attach the top, and I also use this same process to attach the face of the fence. And I just use a 3/8-inch Forstner bit, and then I come back with a drill bit to finish the pilot hole, and then I use a Craig washer head screw. Alright, and here's me trying to achieve some extra style points. Cut out some highly custom triangles, and I held them in place with some clear silicone, and I'm hoping that this just helps direct the chips to the dust collection chute. And here I'm just adding some storage to the top of the fence for router bits and collets and wrenches and stuff. Quick round over for all the doors and drawer front as well as the top. Now it's time to add a little finish, and this is my secret blend of polyurethane and thinner. And no, don't ask, I'm not going to give away the recipe. Now, because the polyurethane has been thinned, it penetrates farther into the MDF, and as it dries, it hardens, and I think this adds a great deal of durability to shop fixtures. And I applied 4 coats to the top, both sides, and 2 coats to everything else. I let everything dry over the weekend, and I'm coming back just on the top and the face of the fence, doing a little sanding, and then I add a small amount of paste wax. This makes for a really slick and smooth surface. After a coat of wax, it was time for final assembly. One issue I've experienced with this router lift is the leveling screws seem to back themselves out, so I'm going to add a little Loctite and see if that helps. After all the final details were complete, I must say I'm pretty happy with the end result. Here's a side-by-side of the old versus the new. Plenty of storage for all the odds and ends, and also plenty of weight. The top alone on this weighs about 42 pounds. And with the 4-inch casters, it rolls around pretty easy and locks in place firmly. So if you're waiting around for me to show a test drive of this router table, it's not going to happen. I kind of decided I'll just show it working in future videos, so you'll have to stick around and stay tuned to see this thing in action. And if I make any changes or have any issues, I will make mention of that in those future videos. So the power feeder that I added to this router table was a Craigslist find. I bought it for $75 and it was literally brand new. It was probably like 15 years old, but it hadn't been used. And because it doesn't have a ton of power, you can't feed really huge, heavy items through. But for the small things that I do, like raised panel doors, cope and stick, moldings and things, it should be just perfect. Plus, it's light enough to take on and off of the router table pretty easily if it gets in the way. And this is my solution for when I need a much wider opening in the fence. I just attach an auxiliary fence with a 4-inch wide opening. And here's another quick pro tip. Make a bunch of shims for your router table fence. This way you can dial in your setup, then you can add a few shims onto the fence, and you can make a cut, remove a shim, make another cut, remove another shim, and this way you won't bog down your router, and you'll get a really nice, clean, finished cut. And I made a couple of these in 1/8 inch, a couple in 1/4 inch, and a couple in 3/8. And you always want to have a way to bury a bit in the fence if needed, and this is how I achieve that. I consider these disposable. So that's it. I hope you found this video helpful, and if not helpful, maybe mildly entertaining. Anyway, till next time, thanks for watching. Close it out with a little summertime fun. The shop apprentice likes to squirt me with the squirt bottles when I'm riding around on the bike. This is about the funnest thing he can think of. And I just wanted to take a second to mention that I'm going to start teaching classes here at the Boardroom in Denver, Colorado. So if you're interested, email me at the email listed at the bottom of your screen, and I'll put you on the list.